Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be able to talk to you this afternoon, and glad you guys decided to take some time out of your, I'm sure, busy schedule to for us to share some thoughts with you. So, the fun fact about visiting the 30 stadiums is, full disclosure, it did take about 17 years to accomplish that, but we accomplished it with my wife and two sons. So we had a lot of fun doing it. I'm a lifelong Cubs fan, so of course Wrigley Field is my favorite. But outside of Wrigley Field, I'm going to have to go with Camden Yards in Baltimore as my favorite. They've really done a great job. Was one of the first ones to redo the stadium, and they've built a nice environment around there, and just a great experience. So, with that, let's dive into the subject at hand. We've got an agenda here for you. We're going to cover three things. Talk about some fundamental techniques that we see of high-performing organizations. We'll talk about building a high-performance organization for you as a controller leading that exercise. And then lastly, talk about finding and using the right tools for success within the organization. So a quick little scenario here for you that I'm sure you're all familiar with. It's the end of the month. You're working fervently to try and close the books for the month. The CEO, the management team wants to know how the month was. And you're in your typical scramble mode trying to get answers. We spend a lot of our time with closely held businesses. And so the instance where the CEO is asking for the results, typically he or she is asking because the bottom line translates directly to their income. So that bottom line is for sure an important metric for them. Did they make money? Did the company make money, or did the company lose money? And typically the easy answer is we didn't make money. The CEO, who's typically going to be sales oriented, is going to say, well, we need to sell more. But you as a next generation controller know that it's more than just understanding, or it's just more than just selling more. You need to have a deep understanding of the profit and loss statement, being educated and empowered to read between the lines, and you also realize that that's a pretty fair undertaking to get to that point. A controller who truly understands the intricacies of the business understands that the solution is going to lie more than just sales. Is it a cost structure imbalance? Is it a margin issue? Is it a spend issue? Is the pricing wrong? Can we improve our processes to try and be more productive? All of those questions are the questions that a next generation controller asks and gets answers to help the organization. A next generation controller knows how to find those answers as well as fix issues related to those answers. So we classify organizations that can find those deeper answers to those deeper questions a strategic, high-performing organization. If your organization isn't currently a strategic, high-performing one, you as the controller can lead that transformation. So a few words on traditional financial accounting and management accounting, which the management accounting is really how we classify the next generation controllers. So full disclosure, I am not a CPA. I was raised up through the financial analysis world, and that's provided me a little bit of a bias toward leaning towards understanding the business needs and not necessarily what I call the compliance needs. In the traditional financial accounting model, accounting is process-driven, governed by routines and standards. Output is measured and it's reported, but the factors that drive those results aren't necessarily measured or, more importantly, understood. The emphasis in the traditional financial accounting world is on consistency and accuracy. So consistency and accuracy, of course, are important things. We can't take our eye off of that ball, but it shouldn't be an emphasis to the point where it for sure cannot be ignored. Accounting has to become more relevant to the organization and not just in compliance mode. So to the point on not taking the eye off of the compliance and standards side of it, you need to, as you're doing financial analysis in the management accounting world, need to have a bridge back to the financial accounting world. So you cannot lose that connection. Our experience is that organizations that think their accounting organization is solely in compliance and backward-looking mode, they lack the overall appreciation of accounting and how accounting, with a slightly different perspective, can provide the organization a strategic advantage in the marketplace. By adopting this more strategic approach, one that switches the perspective from financial accounting to a broader management accounting view, you're able to identify variations in the process where changes can be made. A number of tools can help organizations understand their critical to success factors and how they're measured. When this understanding happens in real time, immediate changes and immediate impact can be made to the organization. When you know what's normal, what the variations are, why those variations exist, and how to adjust for them to maximum performance, that's when you go from being a financial reporter to a strategic partner. So we're going to talk about high performance organizations here today. I wanted to give you a little bit of perspective on how we define a high performance organization. We've listed some components there that we see in high performance organizations: profitability, compliance, goal-driven, innovative. But there's also some traits that we see in high performing organizations as it relates to the controller's office. And a lot of times in the accounting world, we assume that we're going to be managing the numbers to the utmost accuracy. They're going to be timely, and they'll be in compliance with standards. But what really pushes organizations to a higher level, to this higher performing level, is when the controller is an integral part of the management staff and pushing the overall organization into bigger and better things. So let's talk about some fundamental techniques of a high-performing organization. We're going to address three of them today: Lean, Six Sigma, and continuous improvement. We won't get into these techniques in too much detail, but we do see them used in all types of businesses. Whether you're a not-for-profit, you're a service business, you're in manufacturing, distribution, etc. We see these techniques used in all types of operations. If your organization's using one or more of them, then there's definitely a role for you as a controller and your team as accountants to be active participants in these techniques. If your organization's not using these techniques, there's an opportunity for you as a leader to drive the introduction of these techniques into the organization. In a high-performance organization, operational changes, the kind that traditional accounting isn't normally involved with, must take place. A transformational controller, next-generation controller, understands that asking more strategic questions and getting operational expertise involved in the decision-making process is key to creating change. So to touch on the first technique that we see, Lean, Lean is really all about creating the most value with the least amount of resources. It's also focused on eliminating waste. So some shop floor examples that we've got listed there, right? Do the people on the shop floor have the tools and the authority to be able to be the most productive that they can? Are there multiple people involved in a process when it could just take one? Even on the office side of things, thinking about an invoice process, is a simple process like invoicing. Are multiple people involved in the approval, input, all that kind of stuff? Reviewing those operations and having a critical eye to them and asking questions, can we do the same amount of work or even more with the same or less resources, is really what Lean is all about. Lean's also a good opportunity for you as a controller to introduce the concept into your organization. So you think about your accounting organization. Can you look at your close process as an example and close the books faster? Could you close the books with maybe one less person and at least challenge yourself as what that would look like? So I think a lot of the lean principles you can start with yourself in your accounting organization, learn from that, and then introduce those techniques to the larger organization. Six Sigma, or variation control, is a second technique that we see. Six Sigma is for sure the more sophisticated of these tools. One that we often find in manufacturing or even high volume service companies. So when you're processing thousands of invoices or thousands of service tickets in a month, then Six Sigma might be an opportunity for you to take a critical look at the processes involved. And again, Six Sigma is really all about variation control. So variation control involves gathering lots of data and making comparisons to a standard and understanding if there is variation, why those variations are occurring, and what you can do differently to improve that. And then lastly, continuous improvement. Continuous improvement is, just like the phrase means there, right, is really about looking at improvement on an ongoing basis. Improvement in service, improvement products, improvement in processes. And this is continuous improvement for sure is a technique that needs to be a cultural shift if you're going to adopt continuous improvement. So, the second bullet point there is an example, right? Are the employees encouraged to fail fast, right? So is there a culture of it's okay to be wrong or okay to fail as long as you learn from it? Is the organization designed around obtaining feedback and learning from that feedback, good or bad? And then lastly, continuous improvement involves setting goals. So thinking about establishing some key performance indicators and driving change around achieving those goals, setting more aggressive goals, achieving those goals, setting even more aggressive goals, etc. So I just touched on those three techniques there. I didn't go into too much detail, but all three of them are an opportunity to you as a leader of the organization to drive positive change into the organization. And you can use these techniques to transform you and your teams, your accounting teams, into strategic partners in the business. And not just the backward-looking accountants that are around to keep everybody from breaking the rules. You can be actively involved in these techniques as an organization and bring transformation to the organization overall. So, second topic on the agenda, I talked about some techniques used in achieving high performance. How do you go about building that organization? First, a word of caution here. Before you can, from an accounting leader standpoint, before you can take your accounting organization to the next step and help transform the organization, you need to make sure that your house is in order, so to speak. So at a minimum, you need to think about your accounting operations, and are you providing accurate, timely, and compliant financial statements on a monthly basis? You need to find a stable state, a steady state, before you can take your operations to this next high-performing level. And only then, when you have that steady state, should you take the steps toward becoming high-performing. So a little bit on the people side of things, so what we call a well-balanced accounting department. I talked about this stable state, and as you think about the resources that you have in your accounting department, the traditional CPAs are really ones that are focused on that stable state. So they're experts in reporting and compliance and understanding standards and following processes. And The skill set that's needed in order to get to that high performance state is really the latter resource there, the strategic financial thinkers. So folks that are comfortable analyzing the numbers, folks that are thinking about process improvement and streamlining and different ways of becoming profitable. So in most organizations, we see that second resource is not as abundant as the first. Now, believe me, you still have to have that traditional skill set to continue to deliver that steady state. But what pushes organizations to the next level is that second type of resource. Another thought on this is I really like the idea of a mixture of even non-accounting people playing that strategic financial role. And the interaction between the non-accountants in the room, so to speak, interacting with the traditional CPAs. I really see a really cool dynamic and a really cool opportunity there for both sides of the table, so to speak, to learn from each other. Strategic thinkers learning more about what it means to have financial standards, and traditional CPAs learning more about what it means to think analytically. So now you as a leader, as a controller, what are some things you can do to push the organization to that next level? Some questions to ask there. So why, if your organization is not using these techniques, why? And again, as I mentioned earlier, there's an opportunity for you to introduce some of these techniques into the accounting organization. And secondly, just asking the question, what's holding you back? And again, that's one where you don't necessarily need to get permission from the organization to do some of these things. You can do them in your department and show others the benefits of introducing these techniques. But the controller as leader is important. The controller needs to be sitting at the table, so to speak, of decision making in order to be able to transform the organization to the next level. I've got a quick example for you of a client. It's a little bit of a negative example, but I think it helps prove the point. I had a client of ours that had a change in reporting structure where the controller no longer reported directly to the CEO. The controller reported to the COO, who then reported to the CEO. The COO was a very financially capable person, so was able to manage the accounting organization, so to speak, and the finance organization. But again, organizationally, the controller didn't have a seat at the management table. So over a period of 3 or 4 years, we saw that the organization, quote unquote, took their eye off the ball and didn't emphasize the importance of accounting. And that forced them into a pretty critical situation from a cash flow standpoint, whereby over a period of time, 90, 120 days, they had to make a significant investment in people and in systems in order to get the organization back to a stable state. And just so you know, as a part of all that, they also changed the reporting structure whereby the controller began to report directly to the CEO and not the COO. So again, a little bit of a negative example there, but I think it does help further the point that the controller needs to play a leadership role in the organization. Beyond just the accounting organization, in order for an organization to get to a high-performing state, there needs to be an overall cultural transformation. So here I'm not just talking about the accounting department. This is a shift that needs to take place at the corporate level. And that is, do you have the right people in the right seats? Are you asking the right questions to the right people? The people that know the job best are the ones that should be involved in gathering the data, maybe not necessarily making decisions around it, but for sure in gathering data and helping understanding the right decisions. So those people typically are the folks on the shop floor or on the front lines. And so culturally, as an organization, are you organizationally prepared to get those people involved in this transformation. You as a controller can help lead that cultural change as a leader of the organization. So last item on the agenda here is finding and using the right tools. So we are seeing a transformation in the role of a CFO, one from being solely focused on financial information to a manager of the overall data of an organization. So that will include information coming from ERP, accounting systems, shop floor systems, managing the reporting tools like business intelligence tools, getting involved in HR data systems, HR management systems, getting involved in CRM, customer relationship management systems, and the CFO controller, right, really playing more of a manager of the data of the overall organization. So the controller, we're seeing this new transformational controllers are really involved in more than just the numbers. They're intimately involved in understanding what the sales funnel looks like by looking at the CRM, understanding what the recruiting needs are by looking at human capital management systems. And the only way to really get a full picture and gather all of the data and to be able to make the best decision is to be able to integrate all of that data into one decision-making tool. So we're seeing a trend where the controllers are intimately involved in integrating those technologies to be able to provide the metrics to help to identify opportunities for process improvement and opportunities for improving performance. So as a result of all this, we're seeing the controllers and their teams, their accounting teams, are able to help the organization make real-time strategic adjustments, ensuring maximum performance and maximum output. It's these measurable, provable numbers that give credibility to everybody involved in the decision-making process. So a quick example of this, we've got a client that's a custom builder that prior to us to getting involved in them, everything they did was manual. They had paper order forms. As the orders were completed, they generated work tickets that were paper. The field work that was done on clipboards. The scheduling that they did was done on a whiteboard. All the invoicing was done manually. Everything they did was manually. Well, we helped them go through a little bit of a process transformation in that. They were comfortable with their process for the most part, but we helped them identify a solution that completely, at least, I'll say automated, but added a truly integrated solution to all of that, from estimate to order to delivery to invoice. And a key part of this example is the fact that the organization's controller was the lead person in that exercise. They took ownership of the implementation of that system. They are currently playing a role of owner of all of those processes, even though the operations people are managing them on a day-to-day basis. The controller is really seen as the owner of that system. And they also are seen as an owner of the data that's in that system. So all the metrics that come out of that, whether that be delivery time or what have you, is the controller is seen as the go-to person for that data. So some quick thoughts here on how we as a partner, KSM Consulting as a partner, can help organizations go through this transformation. Firstly, we can be involved in assessing where you are today. We can help you align your financials with the strategic plans that you have. We can even help you decide on exactly what that strategic plan looks like and help you as a controller help the organization get to that strategic plan. I'd say we're any one point in time we're working on an assessment project with a client, so we're probably doing 12 of those a year. We helped an organization, we just got done with a project, helped an organization go through a transformation. They had grown over the years, multiple departments. They had accounting folks dispersed throughout the organization. We helped them streamline the accounting operations, also touched in a little bit on their delivery operations, but we helped them come up with a good, strong assessment of where they are as an organization and what organizational changes they need to make in the accounting organization. Another project that we've wrapped up towards the end of last year that applies to this is we helped an organization that had done a budget process that was really more of a controller-led process and wasn't tied in with their strategic plans. The organization was doing 5-year strategic plans, and they were doing an annual budget. And because the controller was really managing the budget side of that, there wasn't a strong connection between those two things. So we helped the controller move the budget process really out of her office and pushed it down to the organization. So the organization was involved in the budget process, and then we also helped her make that link to the strategy. So just a couple of quick examples of how we can get involved with helping our clients get to that high-performing state. So in summary, I got a couple of takeaways here for you. So we talked about three things today. I shared some techniques that we see high-performing organizations using today. We talked about some ideas on how to build this high-performing organization. And then lastly, we talked about finding the right tools to move the organization to that high-performing level. A couple of key takeaways for you guys today. First of all is I don't want you to lose sight that you've got to make sure that you're in this stable state in your accounting operations. Again, is one of the core services you're providing to the organization is timely, accurate, and compliant financials. And you can't take your eye off of that ball before you move on to some of these bigger picture items. Secondly, I challenge you to place more of a focus on the needs of the business and challenge you to get more involved in the operations of the business. And only then can you become that transformational leader to the organization, whereby you're still continuing to deliver timely, accurate, compliant financials, yet also delivering to the organization to helping the organization making better decisions. And then thirdly, we talked about the process, right? These techniques that we're seeing in high-performing organizations. We talked about the people when I was talking about building high-performing organizations. And then we also touched on the technology. And you need to make sure you have all three of those legs before you can really get the organization to transform into high-performing. If you're optimizing one of those three, you won't be able to get there. Something's gonna fall apart. So there really needs to be an emphasis on all three before you'll be able to get to that next tier. So thanks for listening here. I guess you have an opportunity to chime in on some questions via the chat. And I guess, Mary Beth, do we have a few to address?
Yeah. Thanks, Steve, for the webinar. We'll give you guys all a minute to submit your questions, and we'll see, and then we'll wrap things up. One question it looks like we have submitted, Steve, is that somebody said, I'm already doing many of the things you suggested, but how can I get my organization to buy into the value?
Yeah, good question. So first and foremost, my thoughts that are coming to mind might be a little bit obvious, but the key is to make sure that you're performing on them, I guess. So the first thing that comes to mind is establishing an ongoing financial review meeting with the owner or the management team. They need to be consistent. Every month do them. You'll learn from those discussions around the financials and really get them involved into understanding or having a deeper understanding of the financial. The second thought that comes to mind is come up with a specific analysis that maybe the organization's not seen before, whether that's more of an operational metric, maybe it's a financial metric, but something that maybe the organization hasn't seen before. Come up with that, share that with the organization to try and engage them in conversation. Maybe a third thought that comes to mind is going back into your organization. I guess I suggested this to you earlier, right? But going back into your organization and think about redesigning a process that you have in your department. Redesign it, measure the outcome of that, and then share that whole experience with the management team so that they can get a feel for the power of that technique.
Great ideas there, Steve. We had one more come through, and it says, "How do I know if I'm in a stable state in my accounting organization?"
Yeah, so pretty heavy question there, I guess. But I think first and foremost, you need to. I talked about timely, accurate, and compliant financials. I think you need to measure your capabilities in those three areas. So on the accuracy side of things, maybe you look at how many times you book a manual journal entry or a correcting entry, and measure those over a period of time to see if there are some trends there. And then secondly, challenge yourself on the timeliness. If you commit to the organization that you're going to deliver financial statements by a certain date of the following month, how often are you meeting that deadline? And are there ways to review and ensure that you, in fact, are doing that?